Hi, Andrew from Sachs. Welcome to video number 4 in our 8-video sequence on better decision making in the artificial intelligence era. So far in this sequence, we've talked about what we mean by decisions. We've defined what's a good decision and what's a bad decision. We've looked at the fact that people are different in their capacity to make good and bad decisions. And in this one, what we'll be doing is we'll be talking about broad-mindedness and positive emotions. And the work of Barbara Fredrickson, who is a positive psychologist, has demonstrated that if you have an increasing amount of positive emotion in your life, in other words, you focus on the positive, you do things like you look towards the future rather than look towards the past, you do things like you build your confidence in your own abilities, what will happen is that will tend to broaden your perspective of what it is that you're prepared to take into account in making decisions. Now, the opposite of this is also true. If you've ever met somebody who slipped into depression, you'll notice that they sort of circumscribe their life more and more. They bring in their boundaries. And so, okay, I don't go out socializing, and then maybe I don't go out to work, and then maybe I don't leave my room. Sadly, of course, if you've ever seen somebody who's been truly depressed, it can be a very limited approach to life. So let's look about the positive, which is opening things up by having more positive emotion in your life. And then we'll talk about some techniques of how to achieve that. The broaden and build theory says that as you increase the amount of positive emotions in your life, you will undertake novel thoughts, activities, and relationships, and you build your confidence. By virtue of broadening your perspective, you'll discover, hey, that worked, and maybe I should be more broad-minded about this as well. Fredrickson describes this as a kind of an upward spiral. We often talk about downward spirals. This is an upward spiral. We get happier, we get more positive, we get more confident, we get more optimistic. We try new things, that works. That builds a platform for further growth of positive emotions, and all of that can lead us to be more functional in our lives. Now, at work, you can sponsor this kind of a process, and we will discuss that in later videos about how we lead people to take the positive perspective. One of the things that we have to bear in mind is that if we want people to improve the levels of positive emotions that they have in their life, then sometimes we have to undertake activities. And here are some positive psychology activities which are shown to increase levels of positive emotions, and that will increase things like resilience, and it will certainly increase things like the breadth of the options that people are prepared to consider. The first, reducing focus on the past and concentrating on the future. So we know that people who are future orientated, who envisage a future and work towards it, tend to be happier and more confident than those who don't, and resilient for that matter. Now, we're not talking about necessarily the future being 2 years ahead. It may be as simple as, what am I looking forward to doing tomorrow? What am I looking forward to achieving this week? And then making plans to get there. That's a classic positive psychology activity. The next is a thing called gratitude exercises, such as 3 blessings. Gratitude exercises are as simple as, at the end of each day, writing down, or putting in a spreadsheet, whatever you prefer, but capturing the positive things that happened to you that day. What that tends to do is it tends to cultivate the neural pathways of gratitude, and that tends to make us happier. Martin Seligman, one of the authors who popularized this approach, has demonstrated that people who do this can reduce their depression by as much as a combination of drugs and counseling by doing so. And of course, you don't get any byproducts of that kind of an exercise. It tends not to have negative consequences in the way that, say, medication would. Gratitude exercises can be extremely powerful. Another one is learned optimism exercises, such as 3 anticipations. So 3 blessings are about the things that we are grateful for so far in the last week or something like that. 3 anticipations is, what are we looking forward to? That can increase people's levels of positive emotions. Acts of generosity. Human beings are often described as selfish, and we are in many ways, but we're also phenomenally generous. And it's been demonstrated through research that people who undertake conscious acts of generosity, doing something for other people, tend to end up with higher levels of confidence, resilience, and positive emotions. And there are good reasons for this. One is that we tend to get positive responses back from the people that we're generous to, but also it's kind of life-affirming. If we do generous things to other people, how can we be a helpless, hapless victim of our world? Because it takes a certain amount of agency to be generous to other people. And so it's affirming in that sense. Signature strength exercises. This is an exercise where you sit down and you are conscious of the things that you're good at. Now, if you write them down and become aware of them, in most cases that causes us to be happier and more confident. But then if you actually choose to use those strengths, then that is really powerful. And the reason they're called signature strengths is that we all have a signature which is ours alone. The idea of signature strengths is strengths which are ours alone. And if we're able to use those strengths, that causes us to be more confident and to have more agency in our life, a sense that we can influence our lives for the better. Mindfulness activities, including meditation, being in the here and now. By the way, reducing resilience across the world? Well, if you're immersed in screens a lot of the time, that's the opposite of being mindful. So it's not surprising that levels of anxiety are tending to rise and depression, because mindfulness tends to bring down levels of anxiety and depression. And what that looks like in most cases is really just taking time to focus on the here and now. So concentrate on your breathing, concentrate on what you can hear, concentrate on what you can see. Those kinds of activities will allow thoughts to come, and that's what's often called the narrative in mindfulness activities. Good mindfulness activities don't fight the narrative. They notice the narrative, but then they let it go. So they're not dominated by the narrative. That's a classic mindfulness kind of an activity. So all of these things are activities that can increase the levels of positive emotions. At work, exercises which increase positive emotions, and certainly in a work group, this can be called engagement, where people are optimistic, they're positive, they're energized, they're committed to what they're doing. That can be increased by leadership, particularly leadership which is empowering and causes people to learn at work by sponsoring people to be actively involved in making things better in their workplace. That's what's called facilitative leadership. So we know that positive emotions can affect the way people make their decisions. And if people have the requisite amount of positive emotions, they tend to make more ambitious decisions, more optimistic decisions, more confident decisions, rather than taking decisions which were much more about protecting yourself, much more strategic decisions if you want to make it that way. So it's a good thing to work on the amounts of positive emotions that people have in order to optimize decisions that they make. In the next video in this sequence, we'll be talking about decision derailers, biases and other cognitive challenges. Fascinating stuff. I am biased. I want to put that right up front, but so are you. Join me for the next video to find out what biases tend to affect us on a day-to-day basis.